I don't believe the Republican Party has learned well how to support financially those who are Black Republicans that want to come out the closet. I equate it to being gay back in the 50s or 60s, right? Or even 70s. You didn't come out the closet then.
I think there's something really funny about saying that, like, being a Black conservative means you have to stay in the closet and like hide that you're a Black conservative. I've literally never met a Black conservative that doesn't telegraph that they are a Black conservative. I'm sorry, no disrespect, but like that statement right there is the funniest thing you could say. Just immediately off the top dome, worst fade you've ever seen. Not even a fade at all. The fits are out of control. Even from a judging a book by its cover standpoint, you just immediately know. Okay, and if you don't know, much like a vegan, a Black conservative will tell you that they are a Black conservative. Yeah, I mean, here, this guy, this is my favorite guy. This is the guy. I love this guy. He's always at the airports. I don't know why. Where is he flying? He's like Tom Hanks in that movie of the guy who got stuck in the airport. But at least he's on the plane all the time.
I'm voting for him. Make me feel it.
It's worth noting that the Black poverty rate has been falling ever since Black people started receiving civil rights protections. It's almost as if these progressive policies worked.
Now, you mentioned Black Wall Street, brother, and I want to be very real with you.
Yeah.
Black Wall Street was Tulsa, Oklahoma, the Greenwood District, where Black people built their own community, had their own self-sustained community, beautiful economy, making it for themselves, and white people destroyed it.
Yeah.
It wasn't policy. It was white people.
Well, it wasn't white people. It was
no. Let's be very.
Yeah, no, it was policies. Like, for example, the policy of taking prop airplanes with like Looney Tunes style TNT dynamite and dropping that Looney Tunes style TNT dynamite from airplanes directly on top of Black Wall Street, this Black neighborhood, and not white terror. That was just a terror of white policy. What the
Let's be very clear. It was white people. No.
It was those white people.
It was white people.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no.
In that community.
He said bad apples. White supremacy is not real. It's just bad apples.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
When Black people do what they need to do and build for themselves, and white people destroy it. Yeah. So why is it that you would frame it as a policy thing?
I didn't frame it as a policy thing.
We can rewind it.
You said it was white people.
You mentioned.
I said it wasn't white people. It was those white people. And the reason why I'm saying that is because now we're trying to categorize all white people as evil.
No.
And what I'm trying to say is, back then, because a lot of people don't know this, I'm gonna put this on record. Black Wall Street rebuilt themselves after that. 4 years after that, Black Wall Street rebuilt everything they had, and they prospered for the next 40 years until policy came in and destroyed it because they decided to build a freeway over their town, and that destroyed. So what I'm saying is, if we look at policy and the cultural essence of most things,
oh my God. Wait, he just described, okay, he's not wrong. It is policy. He's talking about a deliberate white supremacist, racist policy that regularly, like, why did the highway have to go through that location? Who made this deliberate decision? What the was that about?
It's not just policy, it's culture.
I was trying to draw a distinction between the nature of progressive policy, like the Civil Rights Act, or Supreme Court decisions to overturn segregation, and white supremacist policy, like destroying Black communities, but the subject kept changing. Lucky for you, I actually made a video about Tulsa, Oklahoma's Greenwood District. It was definitely white racism that destroyed Black Wall Street and other Black communities through explicitly racist acts of state-sanctioned violence. This is why an accurate, full telling of his
Not a big deal, but you got the two events confused. The airplane bombing was the Africa family. No, you're wrong. Airplane bombings were used in Tulsa. It was a helicopter for the Africa family in the MOVE bombing in 1985. They did use, I'm right, they did use airplanes in Tulsa. I think it was literally the first ever instance of an airplane being used on a bombing campaign on U.S. soil. I am correct. It was also one of the earlier airplanes in general. Numerous eyewitnesses witnesses described airplanes carrying white assailants who fired rifles and dropped firebombs on buildings, homes, and fleeing families. The privately owned aircraft had been dispatched from the nearby Curtis Southwest field outside Tulsa. Law enforcement officials later said that the planes were to provide reconnaissance and protect against a uprising. Law enforcement personnel were thought to be aboard at least some of the flights. Eyewitness accounts such as testimony from the survivors during commission hearings and a manuscript by eyewitness and attorney Buck Colbert Franklin, discovered in 2015, said that on the morning of June 1st, at least a dozen or more planes circled the neighborhood and dropped burning turpentine balls on an office building, a hotel, a filing station, and multiple other buildings. Yeah. The Africa family was a helicopter with C4 in a bag. The move bombing is what you're talking about. That's when the Philadelphia Police Department took out a helicopter and dropped C4 on top of a family that was bunkered in 1985. And if I remember, the mayor said, let it burn, right? Wasn't it the mayor? They did not put the fire out. They wiped out a city block.
History is so important. Black oppression and Black progress have always had a collective quality to them. Black people have been throughout American history targeted as a group, from slavery to Black codes to Jim Crow to mass incarceration to anti-inclusion efforts today. But we've also made progress by harnessing the power of collective action during Reconstruction and the Civil Rights Movement, and even today during the Black-owned business boom.
From LBJ, that's why you say we're having these Negroes voting Democrat for the next 200 years. But all those policies have not done what they promised. Would you agree?
I would not agree.
So you think we're better off as Black people now than we were before LBJ passed those policies?
Yo, that's such an embarrassing thing to say. That, yeah, no like, yes, dude, what the bro, I mean, it's another inherent contradiction when you see a Black Republican wear like a t-shirt that has like 1776 on it, which is like, dude, what are you doing? What do you think Black people were doing back then? Like, it makes no damn sense.
Yes, brother, we can vote without the threat of violence. Are you talking about the Civil Rights Act of 1964? Is that what you're describing as a negative thing?
I'm not saying the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was, I'm talking about...
That's LBJ, I just want to be clear. That's LBJ who you said, were we better off before LBJ? LBJ signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
I'm talking about the war on poverty.
I just want to answer that one. I want to answer that specific one first. Was the Civil Rights Act of 1964 bad thing?
I agree with the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Thank you.
But at the same time, I'm also, put like this, I prefer dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery.
I don't know what that means. Explain
What
more.
it means is I would rather, given the fact that even back then we still had our families together, communities were stronger back then, I'd rather deal with...
That's not even true though. Like, what the people were getting lynched. Like, you couldn't eat at the same restaurant. Like, what the the craziest part about it is that, like, obviously the criminal justice system has basically repackaged slavery and you know, kept it legal, but this time under the criminal justice system, right? So it still churns out like similar results in general. Obviously there is a multifaceted approach. There's a million different reasons why Black communities are underserved on top of that. But like, I mean, these were major, I don't know how I'm like, this is such an insane conversation to have. Like, like the notion that like Black communities in the United States of America were better off before the civil rights era is nutty.
With the dangerous free.
Thomas Sowell has destroyed entire generations. The welfare state was bad. It separated Black families. It incentivized Black mothers to stay away from their Black fathers. All this is Thomas Sowell.
Could be a racist.
He's the lead pastor at a Black church in Detroit that Trump visited earlier this year.
Like they said, Black church, the air quotes. Look at the church.
He was also a featured speaker at the RNC.
So all my friends back in Detroit who are Democrats, I want to ask you just one simple question. You can't deny the power of God on this man's life. You can't.
Being raised in a hyper-Christian school does something to your brain. What do you mean? There's a lot of like very religious Black folk. They don't operate like this at all. If you've ever been to a Black church, actually not this one, Black churches, at least the ones I've seen and the ones I've been to, are very political. They are a organizing ground, especially in the South, for the Democratic Party specifically. The Democratic Party takes advantage of that quite a bit. And Black churches in general are incredibly political, and also their politics are pretty awesome usually. I guess all churches are pretty political when you think about it, especially in the United States of America, but specifically Black churches are political in a pretty solid way usually.
Why should Black people support the Republican ticket and Donald Trump specifically?
That's a good question. You know, what I would say to any black person is this, specifically about the Republican platform. I would say, look, do your research, right? I would say, look back to 170 years ago in this state where a group of patriots stood up and they started that grand old party to stop the expansion of slavery. If a black person said, well, Pastor, Donald Trump is racist, the Republican Party is racist, well, let's play that theme out throughout history. Let's look at who was the party of...
Yeah, also, the Republican Party in its inception was like the closest that American major parties have gotten to Marxism. Obviously, it's not the same Republican Party. I hate this argument so much. Oh my God. If the Republican Party is the anti-slavery party still, then why is it that the Republicans are the ones rocking the Confederate garb, man? Why is it that Republicans are the ones who are propping up Confederate statues? Why is it that the Republicans are the ones who are defending Confederate generals and monuments? Why is it that it's the Republicans that are going out to vote and they're wearing the stars and bars proudly while they're doing that? Like, that makes no sense. It's like, yeah, look no further than Abe Lincoln. That's it. Like, just don't worry about it afterward. Like, especially saying it nowadays when in the past parties were more like, the parties were not as polarized, right? Like, they weren't as firmly committed to a almost universal platform. Back then you had Southern Democrats and Southern Republicans that sometimes would be aligned on similar interests, and Northern Democrats and Northern Republicans that aligned on similar interests, because a lot of the party interests, or rather a lot of the political interests, came from regional economic interests. Whereas now in the modern era, it's just like Democrats are one thing across the board, across the entire country, and Republicans are one thing across the board in the entire country. It is no longer a regional split, more so just a simple party split.
Diversity, equity, and inclusion. These are all issues that pertain directly to the people that I know that you serve in your community. Why should they support the party behind the hindrance, the advancement of the very things that I know you stand for?
Sure. Black people that I know, they don't want to be put in a position because they're black. There's not one black person I know that will say to me, Lorenzo, I deserve this position because I'm black.
But I want to. You know that that's not what DEI is. DEI is about fair hiring practices, opening up opportunity, like creating pathways, like.
But you're smart. You're an intelligent man, and those that would say this, I believe they're very intelligent. It costs more money not to hire the person who's the best than to be racist. It actually costs more money. So if you're the best at what you do, right? And let's just say.
This is the coolest, silliest way to argue at the behest of white supremacy, because the entire reason for why these sorts of policies, including like affirmative action and exist, is so that you, by force at certain points, try to get like the majority white population in positions of power to not make racist exclusionary decisions in hiring practices, which has been the standard throughout American history and still continues to this day through a form of implicit biases that people don't even know they have. You're white, you're more predisposed to hiring a white guy. You're a white man, you're going to most likely want to hire a white man. That's just how it works statistically. You have the capacity to overlook other races regardless of their qualifications. The anti-DEI narrative literally is built around this faulty assumption that a black person is never as good as a white person when they are hired for that job. That means, like, if a black person is in a position of power, that means that they automatically disqualified a more qualified white person that should have gotten that position. It's ridiculous.
Say I'm a racist. So let's just say that, let's play that out, right? And let's just say, hey, there are 20 white guys that are not as competent as you, but I'm not gonna pick you because you're black. It's gonna cost me more money.
They don't even know that this qualified person exists, right?
Sure, I hear you.
The pathways are the problem. And a lot of what diversity, equity, and inclusion is doing is creating those and helping to clarify those pathways.
One of the funniest parts about this is that, like, you know, black people have disposable income as well. They also participate in the economy. So do brown people, so do women. So these DEI initiatives, as a matter of fact, are conducted in an effort to elevate people from different backgrounds to higher positions, hopefully to not overlook them when they are qualified, right? And the reason for why they do it is because corporate boards that have have more diversity end up having more profitable corporations. So the real reason for DEI in general is that it's good to have a black dude on the board because they have an entirely different world experience than the 8 other white dudes that are on that board that might be able to see certain things that the 8 other white dudes will miss because of their, you know, their privilege, their biases. That's why there's always like that thing where we'll look at something and we'll be like, was there not like a single black person in the company at any point that like looked at this and went like, well, this is kind of weird. We probably shouldn't do it.
In his book, The Grift, Clay Kane details the history of how black conservatives have thrown black people under the bus to get ahead personally. From black Republicans like Isaiah Montgomery and Booker T. Washington to modern black Republicans like Clarence Thomas, Clay Kane makes the case that the modern black Republican is likely, if not assuredly, a grifter, a person who is doing that which is politically expedient rather than doing what is right, doing whatever they need to do to get that all expenses paid trip to.
I think it also stems from like a cynicism that like white supremacy is so ever present and like impossible to combat, so that you're just like, at least I'll get mine. Because Clarence Thomas is a really interesting person because he's like also kind of a black nationalist too at the same time. I mean, that's how he started off as originally, and he still has some of these like black separatist opinions. Very weird. Also has a white wife. It's like odd in every way. Truly a unique figure.
A relatively small percentage of black people will vote for Trump this November, but I have a take and I want to share it with you. A more inclusive and racially diverse Republican Party could be a good thing. American conservatives and Republicans have made the lives of black people difficult on purpose. From the Southern strategy to welfare queens to anti-woke, anti-DEI stuff today, American conservatives have galvanized their white base by making the lives of black people harder. It could be a good thing to see more black Republicans if it means that the Republican Party is becoming actively hostile to the racists who have called that party their home for the last 60 years at least. Make American politics inhospitable to racists. I'm all in on that platform. But the reality is that racists, or at least racism enablers, were present and accounted for at the RNC. They were given stage time, had exclusive access.
It also happens to be the entire platform of the Republican Party still to this day. You have 2 racist parties. At least one is like doing its very best to mask its racism in the endless continuation of white supremacy and policing in the criminal justice system that is baked into American existence in general. And I'm of course talking about the Democratic Party in that circumstance. But the other one is actively running on the racism because it looks at the white supremacist criminal justice system and it says, this is good and we need more of it. And we got two people in the chat. One said, you are so wrong. No follow-up whatsoever. The other said, explain the racism better than just saying everything is racist. The American criminal justice system disproportionately targets black people. The American financial system has historically also underserved black communities through legal processes and now illegal ways, segregation in the South, Jim Crow laws in the South, redlining in the North and everywhere else. And this has led to black people having worse outcomes overall on healthcare, education, job opportunities, and, you know, more importantly than that, having a criminal record. This is what we mean when we say America's a white supremacist nation. Obviously, I'm not even talking about like the long history. I'm just saying last night you blamed white supremacy for the No Palestine speaker. Yeah, that is a different form of white excellence, white supremacy, America's hegemonic superpower status that comes from destroying the global South, which is comprised predominantly of non-white people, brown people, black people. That is also still white supremacy. This is foreign policy, though. We're talking about domestic policy, which is like similar to foreign policy in that regard. You can see black communities as like internal colonies, like interior colonies. It's in every part of the system, and it manifests itself in ways that you oftentimes don't even recognize. Like, for example, we now that like the Watchmen and talked about it extensively. It's a little bit different. But back in the day when I used to talk about like Tulsa, the Tulsa massacre, there were black people in this community that didn't even know about it. Why is it that a Turkish white guy is talking about a important part of black American history to black people that grew up in the United States of America? How is it that that's the first time that they heard about it? It's because in a lot of the curriculum, they don't teach it. Now, I think it's a little bit different now, but I'm talking like, 6, 7 years ago. That's because American education is still firmly a whitewash version of events. This is one of the unique ways that you don't even recognize where you are, even as a black person, growing up in a white supremacist system. Does this help you understand it a little bit? Let's continue.
Yes, and seemed central to the whole operation. And I'll tell you what did not feel central. Black people. I actually attended the Black Delegate event during the RNC, and something really interesting happened. The event was taking place away from the main convention center. And in the middle of it, unexpectedly, former President Donald Trump's motorcade could be heard approaching the event from a distance. But then his motorcade just drove by. It turned out he wasn't coming to the event. It wasn't on his schedule. It just happened to be along his route.
He waved at us. In case you didn't see it, he waved.
The disappointment for this group of black Republicans was tangible and kind of poetic. And I think that's my big concern with the future of the Republican Party. The RNC had quite a few drive-by acknowledgments that black people exist, but little to no substantive action plans for how they
Also, the formative role that black Republicans play at the RNC historically is literally to stand there and say whoever the president is not actually racist. Sometimes going beyond that and even denying that systemic racism doesn't exist as well. That's it. I watch this shit every time. I CPAC convention, like I watch CPAC, I watch RNC, I watch all this shit. And that's precisely the role that every black Republican plays. And it has not changed in like the decade that I've been covering politics